Hey there, this is Andrew bringing you another deck review. This is not going to be an on-stream opening because I opened this deck in sealed play at my local game store this past Saturday. So excited to show it off because I won. I went 3-0 with it. But additionally, I went ahead and scanned it in, took a look, and SAS, which is not perfect, said that it was good. In fact, according to SAS, it is one of my very best decks. So that triggered me to think, I should take a look at this. And there was some stuff in here that I was really excited about already. But I want to be honest about the fact that it was actually that high SAS rating that made me think I really need to prioritize getting some reps in testing this in online competitive play. And I would like to think I would have recognized how good it was and played it at some point anyway, but it certainly would have taken a while to get around to it. And for someone with a fairly large collection, I think the SAS really triggered me to go spend some time. Now, is it my best? I'm not sure. I still have at least one other deck that I think is a little stronger, but there's some good stuff in here. Um, Even though it is weird, so this really could be uh, a great adaptive deck in the long run, but we'll kind of see. Yeah, I'll have to see how that works out because I have not handed it to anybody else yet to play. But it turns out it is pretty good. It is able to contend with other very high SAS decks. So I decided it'd be fun to walk through it and talk about what's unique about it. And there's one other just primer I'm going to say here. As I was thinking about this deck, I had just been listening to the Help from Future Self podcast, which I highly recommend. They might be one of the only Keyforge podcasts still going really strong right now, but um, anyway, and still planning to even through. I don't know of any plans they have to pause. Anyway, they've been going through old Bouncing Death Quark episodes and talking about the main support burst model for thinking about houses in a deck. And so I was thinking about that here, and I'm not convinced that that is always the correct way to think about decks. But I certainly have found it useful in this deck. So I'm going to actually talk about this deck in the main support burst concept, which I guess if you look at the houses, you probably could have a guess here at what they are. Um, anyway, I'll share my thoughts on that. And if you find that model for thinking about decks interesting, then I really highly recommend listening to the recent Help from Future Self episodes. All right, with all that intro stuff out of the way, let's go into the deck. This is a mass mutation deck, even though, based on the houses, it could be from any of the first four sets. But yeah, it's from set four. So, Caedwen Barony Researcher is the name of it. And we'll start with these. So first off, we have Bonesaw. That's just a solid card. That's fine. Next, we're going to find 2 copies of Dark Minion. I guess you can see the Drekker coming up. These are interesting. Give a little bit of board control with their destroyed effect, but nothing too crazy. All right. Drekker is interesting. The question with Drekker is always, can we find a way to use this? And yes, in fact, there are some ways to use it, but it's worth just pointing out that Drekker, it's so easy to kill. And you even have to be careful where you place it, because if you place it next to Bonesaw, then you probably don't want to fight with the Bonesaw. If you put it next to Dark Minion, which you probably don't want to fight with most of the time anyway, it actually sets up this situation where an opponent can easily just swing into the Dark Minion, take the 1+1 hit, I guess, dealing, whatever its full damage is to the Drekker without taking 4 damage back. So that's a little bit of a challenge where to put the Drekker. But if you can reap with it, it's good to reap and steal. In Furnace, this is an important tool. Get to do a little bit of amber control, delete some important cards. And thinking about the last Help from Future Self episode I listened to, they were talking about Deese's um, ability to just turn off ways that your opponent's deck could hurt you. Infernus is a really good example of how to do that by purging their cards. Then we have two copies actually of Mark of Dees, and this is a really good workhorse. Now, would this be better if it were a Control the Weak? I think so, and potentially the damage matters, but generally speaking, I'd rather have Control the Weak. Although, well, we'll come back to that concept of damage later. But I've had really good success with the Marks of Dees here, being able to push my opponents into houses that are not going to be advantageous for them. It's really effective, and being able to do that while destroying stuff and purging stuff can really be nice. You can really put your opponent into some situations where they just can't do much, and you're really starting to limit them. All right, next we have Anguish. There's very little Amber control in this deck. Infernus is some of it, Drekker's some of it, Anguish is some of it, and this Anguish happens to have a draw pip on it. Now, it's possible you could throw damage on it with the Mark of Dees, but you probably don't want to do that. Anguish gives us a nice big body. Other than the Dark Minions, notice we have 4s and 5, a 6. So we have some pretty big bodies here. And if Anguish sticks on the board, then it can be a real problem in terms of Amber control. So that can be nice. Essence Scale is such an important card here because it lets us use these creatures on the turn they're played. So getting to drop a Drekker and a Dark Minion and then Essence Scale the Dark Minion, spraying the opponent's creatures with damage, to reap with the Drekker, steal one, and then play the Bonesaw ready, all that gets really good really fast. So the Essence Scale is a really important piece of the puzzle here. Occasionally I've been able to do other interesting things with it that we'll kind of come back to after some of the other cards come out, but Essence Scale is really good. It can also be used to swing the Anguish on the turn it's played into an opposing creature, getting damage on it the turn that it's played. So that can be really great. Also factors in with the Mark of Dees, right? Put some damage on something, use Essence Scale to swing Infernus or something into it, finish it off. They're left with a, call the house you told them to, and then pass. All right. Next, we have Dance of Doom. Great creature removal here. Pick a power, choose a number, and destroy every creature with that number power. Also very good with the Mark of Dees. Really helps us control the opponent. Got a couple other great cards here. Screaming Cave is really fun. Now, if you don't like shuffling, then it's not great. But if you can get these like this kind of combo to hit multiple turns, it gets really good, right? Mark of Dees, Infernus, Essence Scale the Infernus to reap with the Drekker, Screaming Cave. Maybe you get the Mark of Dees and the Infernus back. It can be really cool. So, Screaming Cave is just really nice. And then we have Shadow of Dees. Action with an Amber. Completely turns off the text boxes. They're blank on your opponent's cards. Importantly, that matters even when they're being played. So if they play an Infernus after you've played Shadow of Dees, they don't actually get the play effect. So that's really nice. It's a great card. And having that even factor in with the Mark of Dees, the Infernus, the Screaming Cave, getting to play this multiple times per game can really have a substantial impact on how the game works and what your opponent's able to do. You're completely turning off. Oftentimes, creature abilities are what they were counting on, and you're completely turning those off. So that's really good. And then getting to go through that multiple times in a row sometimes with Screaming Cave is just fun. All right, let's talk logos. First card here, Auto Encoder. It's a great card. So already you're going, okay, this has a chance of being a great deck because it has Auto Encoder. However, I'll just point out, I really wish Auto Encoder comboed with Screaming Cave. It just doesn't. That's okay, but I wish it did. It'd be so cool. Screaming Cave does not discard your hand. It just shuffles it into the deck. There are, yeah, it is really good in this deck, the autoencoder, and we'll talk about why. I there's a this is an artifact deck. You'll see some more come out, but it is definitely an artifact deck. Autoencoder is very tempting to just hard mulligan for, although if I get a Screaming Cave or something, then I'm probably okay. But it is really nice if we can get the autoencoder early. All right, next we have Diametric Charge, a little bit of creature control there, nothing major. Eclectic Inquiry puts some more speed on the deck. 2 copies of Lethalogica, one with a damage pip. This also helps us speed through the deck. Sometimes it goes past cards we wanted, but it's a really nice just gets bonus amber, lets us play more. It's pretty good. Munchling. This is an interesting one because if we can get it to hit, it's fine. It usually doesn't end up living long. Depending on the circumstances, sometimes I'll discard it to feed the autoencoder, but it really depends. Humex. Very nice. Play, draw a card. It's 1 power. It dies. It goes back to your archives. Excellent. Kurzap. More creature control here. So this destroys each non-mutant creature, gives us a chain. Um, really helps keep that board clear. And as long as we aren't really counting on our Dees board sticking around, it's pretty good. And if it's not the right time to play it, which in this deck it often isn't because the other creature control options are so strong, then you just discard it and feed the autoencoder. Now, mutagenic serum in this deck is not great, and there's a very simple reason for that, which is there are not many mutants. There's Munchling, there are 2 dark minions, and I think that might be it. So even in Untamed, I don't think we have any mutants. So that is that's a little rough on the mutagenic, but that's okay. It gives us an amber pip. Sometimes it tricks opponents into destroying it with their artifact control. And if you really need, you can discard it to feed the autoencoder. Neurosiphon is fine. Potentially steal and draw. And Novu Dynamo here is great. Novu Dynamo with autoencoder has been one of my favorite combos in Mass Mutation. And yeah, getting to pitch these Logos cards out of your hand at the start of your turn without calling Logos, feeding the autoencoder, go Dees, it adds up. And in fact, some of the games where things have gone really well with this deck, one of the things that sometimes happens is having Novu Dynamo, having autoencoder, having Screaming Cave, and just calling Dees several turns in a row, playing those Dees cards, but getting to pitch a Logos card and archive the top card of the deck at the beginning with the Novu Dynamo, it's really good. Academy training, this is fine. Sometimes it lets you get a reap and draw on your Logos turn out of a non-Logos creature. That's fine. Sometimes it's a pitch to feed autoencoder because one of the things you might notice here, we don't have a lot of creatures. In Logos we have 3. In Dees we have more. We have 6 creatures in Dees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And spoiler alert, we only have 3 in Untamed. So there's not always a good target for Academy training, but it can be pitched to feed the autoencoder. Okay. Flumph. So we're in Untamed now. The creatures in Untamed are not amazing, but they're okay. We have Flumph, is what it is. Ghost Talk can give us some good extra reaps sometimes. Extra bonus if you get like Academy training and Drekker value out of it. I've had that happen before, but mostly it's just an extra amber here or there. And then Keyfrog, that's cool because that lets us forge on our turn sometimes. That's a really nice benefit when we can do that. It gives us a little extra control. In Dees, we're controlling what the opponent's allowed to do. In Logos, we're accelerating our game. And then Untamed, Keyfrog lets us sometimes escape punishment for our crimes of having a lot of amber. And with enough archives and whatnot, it's common to be able to get the Keyforge out when we need. All right. 2 copies of Lost in the Woods. This is really nice creature control. Partially because if you're getting the right creatures with this, you're gumming up your opponent's deck. And it gets around things like Scudam and Ludo. So sometimes it's just really great. And generally just getting the creatures off the board is good. Some of our creatures are really nice to hit with this. The Ghost Hawk, the Infernus. I think that's actually the whole list of cards that are nice to hit with this. Anything else we're just getting out of the way, but that's fine. Resurgence doesn't do a lot here. It has a damage pip on it, but this isn't doing a lot of work here. If I could trade out any single card in this deck, it'd probably be the Resurgence. Although it is occasionally okay to get back the Key Frog or Ghost Hawk, so it's not totally worthless, but this is probably the number one card I would trade out. 2 copies of Savage Clash, more insane board control. Having 2 Lost in the Woods, 2 Savage Clash means the opponent's board is almost never sticking around. This has a really high ability to just blow up boards. Song of the Wild, not in love with this card either, partially because we just tend not to have big boards. We only have 3 untamed creatures. So unless the Ghost Hawk is in the same hand with the Song of the Wild, it's not going to do much. Commune, also not amazing. But, well, I have had enough turns where I do play this and get 4. I think I've gotten more value out of Commune in this deck than any other deck I've had it in, so that's something. But additionally, Song of the Wild, Extra Savage Clash, Resurgence, Commune, these cards, if they're wrong to play in the moment, it feels a lot better when you have an autoencoder out. So autoencoder really turns those into better cards than they would be otherwise. And then this is a real workhorse. Fangtooth Cavern is so big here for a couple of reasons. Um, so obviously what it does is at the end of your turn you destroy the least powerful creature. All right, first off, the obvious combo, this is what makes the Key Frog work because we can forge at the end of our turn using Fangtooth Cavern and Key Frog. That's great. What else can we do with it? Well, we only have 12 creatures in this deck. There are only 12 creatures. So we're not typically competing for, staying on the board. The number of times that my opponent has, 3 creatures and I have none, with this deck it's a lot. And so Fangtooth Cavern keeps those numbers down and it's just plinking away at the opponent's creatures. And when you add in cards like Savage Clash, what you're doing is destroying all but one of their creatures, and then Fangtooth Cavern takes care of that. So it really does a ton of work. The dark minions tend to die to this, but sometimes I'll have, my opponent has a creature, I have 2 dark minions in my hand, I have autoencoder on the board, I just pitch the dark minions, archive some stuff that'll go into a power turn later, and let the Fangtooth Cavern do the work. So that's a really useful card to have. And lastly, here we have Earthbind. This is just a little extra board control. Again, not totally in love with this, but gives an amber. You can put it on a creature, and it makes the creature harder to use. That's pretty good. All right, so let's talk about this. First off, there's not a ton of amber here. The E is not the highest that I've had index for sure, but it's there. It's definitely there. So you can generate amber in this deck. Probably its biggest weakness is an overall lack of amber control. Notice there was none of it at all in Untamed. That's not shocking. Very little in Logos, only the Neurosiphon. So very little amber control there. And then really most of the amber control is in Dees. And even there we don't have great options. We have Anguish, we have Infernus, and we have Drekker. So there's not a lot of ways to take away the opponent's amber. What we are doing a lot of is just slowing them down and not letting them take the turns that they want. And that's a really valuable thing. So if the opponent's not taking good turns, then we're doing okay here. And that's where maybe against like a Coda deck, I would probably end up wishing I had Control the Weak instead of Mark of Dees, because there are some Coda decks that can just zip through with only actions, and that could be a danger here. The Where this deck shines is on the control side, and that's on two axes. One is creature control, which is insane here. We have Fangtooth Cavern, two Savage Clashes, two Lost in the Woods, Kurzap, Diametric Charge. Shadow of Dees is certainly a form of creature control. Dance of Doom, good ways to fight. Mark of Dees, Dark Minions. So we have a lot of ways to just keep wiping the opponent's board. And even if they have small boards with a couple creatures, we're able to keep those at bay. And even if they go very wide, it's not going to take us long to draw into one of those Savage Clashes and get to just wipe them out. So it really does a good job of staying on top of the board and not letting the opponent get any sort of board advantage at all. But add to that the ability to completely turn off creature abilities, purge cards that you don't want to see again, push them into a house. It actually gets pretty good. We are just able to keep the opponent from doing what they want enough that we can do what we want. Now, that's been really effective. I mean, I've been winning against other decks in the high 80s and even into the 90s of SAS. So this is a real gem of a deck and plays very differently because it is so heavy on the control. It is all about control. It makes it a very interesting, different deck. Okay, what are the weaknesses here? Well, the most obvious one is that if you can destroy these artifacts, if you destroy the Fangtooth, the autoencoder, the Screaming Cave, suddenly this deck struggles a lot more because those cards that maybe aren't doing anything in the moment really become dead. If you can do insane Amber Bursts, that's a problem. If you can dodge the control and land scaling Amber Steals and whatnot, or just play tempo games, that can be rough. And obviously, it does not have any artifact control of its own, so that can potentially be an issue as well. But that said, it's had pretty good runs and been able to do a lot of work. So I plan to keep testing with it, keep exploring what it can and can't do, and see what I can get done with it. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. Again, if you are well, I first off, I just can't say enough. Support your local game stores. If I wasn't going to local sealed still, I would not have this beautiful, beautiful deck. Second, thanks to Decks of Keyforge, Corythan, for bringing my attention to a really fun, good deck. And then again, the help from future self. Oh, I should pay it off actually. So I guess it makes sense that it's not shocking that you would have an Untamed that is burst, a Logos that is support, and a Dees that is main. Although, yeah, that's certainly the case here. The Untamed burst here is a little weirder because it is not like pure Amber burst for the most part, except for the Commune if that comes up at the right time. But you can burst into crazy board control and then forge out a key out of turn and get ahead that way. So you do tend to want to save up the Untamed for a big turn where you're dropping a lot of Untamed cards, but it's not the kind of Coda Untamed way of like, I'm just going to produce 20 Amber and play 2 key cheats or something like that. There's nothing like that going on here. We do have the 1 key cheat, but it's just more about maintaining and control. So you're kind of getting stuff done, and then if things start to get out of hand, you pop into Untamed and reset everything and get back to where you're ahead. And those Untamed, again, if we can call Untamed once in a while just to get a nicer hand set up, that's typically what we're trying to do. All right, so if that way of thinking about the deck sounds interesting to you, again, I really highly recommend the Help from Future Self podcast and their episodes they've been doing recently. But yeah, that's that. That was Caedwen Barony Researcher. Maybe you'll run into me playing it. Um, Thanks again, and get out there and forge some keys.